Hello everyone and welcome to the Pixel Tavern. This is part 2 out of 3 of my Spotlight on Extra interview with Masterz1337, the lead developer of Halo SPV3.2, this time covering more questions from the community and some of my own. If you missed part 1, click the card icon in the top right corner of your screen to get taken straight to it. I hope you enjoy the video and watch out for part 3 in the next week. Subscribe and click the bell icon to stay notified of its release. Until the next video everyone, thank you very much for watching and enjoy part 2.
Cool, all right, we will move on to Lord M. Sigro2's question. So he asks, why in the last release of the mod it seems to not be using the most updated assets you guys have made?
Well, the stuff that he's talking about is actually kind of older stuff.
Okay.
We redid a bunch of the stuff like the DMR, particle effects, plasma grenades. The ghost alternate firing cannons just doesn't really work well when you're trying to balance the AI because you can't maintain the same damage output per second as you do when it goes at the same time. Simply stuff we didn't like or didn't really work in a way that maintained consistency with what we wanted. With the exception of the Halo 3 style shade turret, that one is funny because I really advocated that we add that because I like the idea of being able to take the warthogs and ram it to destroy the shade turrets.
Yeah.
Once we got into the actual campaign and the missions and all the scripts we were using, that takes an enormous amount of script space. So it made more sense to just use the regular shades because they were cheaper in terms of scripting budget. But then also when we added the shadow into it, the Covenant equivalent of the warthog, it uses the shade turret on it because it's all based to be modular. You know, it's got the little energy socket and then the little gun turret ball sits inside it. So whatever we develop for the gun turret, we can use for the gun turret for the shadow can also be used in the shade and vice versa. So that's why we don't use the Halo 3 style shade turret.
Yeah, it makes sense. That reminds me actually, with talking about the assets and everything, I love what you've done with the purple of Covenant vehicles. You can see all like the grid shape to them. I really like that, so fair play on making that into the game.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because that was planned originally for the Sound Photographer Evolved, but the main developers on that one didn't like it. It was a whole thing. I mean, a lot of kind of drama. I'm not really sure if they didn't like the shader style on that or there was more of an ego thing. I don't know what it was, but we wanted that. We never, for one reason or another, we never added it back in. And then when we were looking at what we wanted to revise for this, it was kind of like, it would be really nice to make all the Covenant stuff look more consistent.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that in this release, stuff is a lot more consistent than it used to be.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember from the last release, one last year you had, like everything was kind of taken from different areas. But yeah, this time, everything seemed very consistent.
It's all original content, but, you have multiple artists over multiple years. So a big part of this was being able to look at those shaders and get a different level of consistency and replace some legacy assets that we had and were using, but weren't really happy with having.
Right, so we have another question here from Gunslinger. What's your opinion about MCC coming to PC?
It's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much my answer to that one as well.
Yeah, there's not much. I mean, there's not much to really say. It's definitely a good thing. I just hope that they supply it with enough support for modding because I would like to see those games have communities like ours for another 15 years.
Yeah, it'd be great to see that to just carry on. And I'm glad with these PC versions, they didn't go, we're announcing it for PC, it comes out 2 months' time. They're clearly spending a lot of time to get this right, so they don't have the same issues they had with the Xbox One release. Yeah,
I mean, it's a pretty big project. I mean, I think they said there's something like 6 or 7 game engines, maybe 9. So they have Reach, Halo 1 Anniversary, Halo 1 Multiplayer, Halo 2 Anniversary, Halo 2 Multiplayer, Halo 2 Anniversary Multiplayer, Halo 3, Halo 3 ODST, Halo 4.
I mean, it's a hell of a lot of work, and considering that game on Xbox One you can normally pick up for like, well, you can pick up pretty cheap these days. It's amazing how much work has gone into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's more of a Game Pass thing now. I mean, it's a reason to buy an Xbox, even if they make zero on the game.
Yeah.
People are buying into the Xbox ecosystem and friends and getting hooked in.
Yeah.
So, every time you look at these first-party games, it's not just about, how many dollars they're pulling in. It's about what it's doing for the ecosystem and their services. And
Yeah, that definitely seems to be Microsoft's way of handling the Xbox now, which is, I must admit, is a really good way of doing things, because it just means that they have a lot more diversity in their games, I find, which is very good.
Look forward to Gears coming out, actually.
Oh yeah, Gears 5 coming out. I need to, I don't know why I've just never gotten around to completing Gears 4. I've got it, I'm probably like 3/4 of the way through it and just never finished it. I'll get around to it eventually.
It's good, I really liked it. I also played, last summer when I got my Xbox One X and 4K TV, I played through 2 and 3 because those are in 4K.
Oh yeah.
It's incredible how those hold up.
Yeah, I do remember those games always. I mean, I've seen it running on an Xbox One X, and yeah, it does look incredible. Like, because it has the X enhancements, doesn't it, for those? So.
Yeah, they're both running full 4K.
Well, speaking of sort of how everything runs, we've got another question from his name is not a Mexican. We've got he just asked, will we have better optimization for this release?
Yes and no. If you have a really low-end computer, you can put post-processing onto Bear, and that will actually result in both better graphics and better performance than the last release. However, you'll lose access to some gameplay-specific features like visor and thermal vision, but overall your performance will be better. Meanwhile, if you're trying to run the game with everything on full, especially with the post-processing, it's going to be performing worse than it did before.
Yeah, I tried to run mine at full spec as well, and it'd be fair to my computer, it did seem to handle it, but a couple of slowdown here and there, but kind of expected. Yeah. My PC's 5 years old now, so I've got to give it some credit.
Most of the post-processing is very dependent on your resolution. So when you're doing a jump from like 1080p to 4K, it's really putting a much larger stress on the computer. So, but it still looks good at 1080p. There would be some people who'd probably rather play it at 1080p with full graphical settings than 4K with it with less of them. So, but people will figure out what they want. I mean, all the options and customization are there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, put in a lot of options for that this time, which was good to see. Perfect. Well, we have one more question from the community. Then there's a few from myself. This one's from S.09B.O. He asks, what will the SPV3 team be doing after SPV3.2 comes out? Obviously, we've spoken about Firefight, so is there any plans beyond that at all?
Yeah, so we're sort of restructuring. There's been people who have worked on this for a long time who just simply want to go on and do other things. And they'll still be around, like hanging out in the Discord and talking with us. But we're bringing some new people on to work on a new single-player project, which is not a campaign. I think people will really like what we have in mind. It's going to be very different than anything Halo players have seen before. And it's currently codenamed is Legacy. Yeah, that we'll be probably talking about next year. But for the rest of the year, we have the Firefight maps coming out. And how many of them we do and how much we continue to work with that really depends on how the community reacts to it. Sure. I'm kind of the opinion that once you have a good Firefight mode or any survival mode, people kind of select what their favorite map is and they just stick to that.
Yeah.
Which means when you do like a bunch of them, almost all of them get ignored except for like 2 or 3. So I'd rather just focus on doing like 2 or 3 good ones, 3 or 4 than 2 or 3. But you know, it really depends what the demand is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's best to stick with a small amount of content that you can get perfectly right rather than spread yourself too thin, so to speak.
Yeah, or just do, I mean, quantity over quality is a thing that people accuse us of doing with SPV3 at times, because we have just so much stuff in there. But I think, you know, you need to have a balance of it. I also don't think that the quantity doesn't matter if people are just going to gear towards the quality parts that they like. So.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
You know, like I said, I think 3 or 4 maps is probably the sweet spot.
Cool. Right, well, we have a few more questions. These are all from myself now. The first one I'd like to ask you, what change are you most proud of with SPV 3.2, and why is that?
So we're talking about change between this and the last version, or?
Yeah, I would say that.
Oh, man. So, obviously I'm really proud of the new missions. I think they had a lot and really fleshed out the game. It was really fun to work on stuff where we had more creative freedom. But, so those I'm really proud of. So the post-processing stuff that Jazz did really makes the game finally look like its own thing. It really finally looks like its own Halo game at times.
Yeah.
But I'm also really proud of Sprint and how good it is now.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when we first started trying to do Sprint, the idea was basically, yeah, like the center reticle will disappear and you'll just run faster. And that will be that, because we don't have any way to make the animations play.
Mm.
And then we finally found a way to make the animation play in a very basic way for the last releases, and it was cool that it like worked that well, but it's still kind of wonky and didn't feel that great. But the new version, I've had people say it feels better than the Sprint in the official games. So the fact we were able to pull that off that well makes me really happy.
That's good, man. I mean, yeah, when I was playing through the Moria campaign earlier, I noticed how good the Sprint has gotten, even just from the past few weeks of playing this. Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much nailed it. I can't think of what else you could do to really tweak it and make it even better, but yeah. So, second question for me. If there was one thing you could bring to the mod that isn't already in the game, what would it be and why?
When Halo 4 came out, we basically concepted a bunch of Halo 4 weapons with some new takes on them, one of them being the railgun. And the idea was to make a gravity rifle that would be able to be basically like it was basically going to be the railgun, except instead of loading ammo into it, you would take grenades out of your inventory.
Ooh.
And each one would have its own unique properties once it's put in the gun. Like the plasma grenade would be almost like what became the plasma caster, the frag grenade would be like the regular railgun.
Yeah.
The cluster grenade would be able to drop stuff down on people. And then the gravity grenade would suck people along as it traveled through the air. And like you could pin them against surfaces and stuff. So it'd like shoot out a wave of gravity of the field that's being shot out of the gun. So that was just way too crazy to do, but I think we might be able to pull it off for the new project. That's actually one of the first things on my list when we're done with this to go start looking at.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that. That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's one gun that I've always wanted to do and never have.
Well, we'll move on to the next one then. So, what was the first ever edit you remember making to Halo CE, and why did you do it?
So the first edit I ever did for Custom Edition was just changing how much camera shake there would be from a plasma grenade to make them more dangerous, because I thought they sucked back when I was a kid. But the first Halo mods I ever did on the PC were basically kind of the forerunners of the stuff we do now. It was like changing the assault rifle accuracy and the Marine AI to make them more effective and things of that nature.
So were these the first sort of things that you brought into SPV3?
It's a good question. I'm not sure.
Do you remember what the very first thing was for SPV3?
I know for SPV1 it started just as repackaging the original campaign with some new textures, and then adding in the battle rifle, and then everything kind of snowballed from there.
Oh, fair enough. So pretty much changing textures was kind of your very first thing,
yeah? Yeah, taking other people's textures and just giving it a fresh coat of paint.
Fair enough.
It was like some really bad texture pack that put like corrugated metal, like you have like the diamond metal on the floors and stuff in like warehouses.
Yeah.
It was like that all over the Forerunner environment. It's like, why would that be there? So I don't know, it's metal texture.
Yeah.
I was like 15 or something at the time, like this is cool.
Well, this next one is definitely one that I wanted to ask you. Obviously, you've got the energy sword in the game now. How difficult was it to code that? I feel like it would have been extremely difficult.
It's not as crazy as you think. It's basically no different than the oddball or the flag. It's basically just giving you the oddball and the flag and making the visuals different. Then what became a little bit more tricky, though, was getting it so when the player dropped it, they would instantly disappear, because you can't tell the game to delete an object like that. So what we ended up doing was having the game do damage to the object, which then deleted it, which was kind of a weird workaround because you couldn't just say, like, delete this object.
So what made you decide to turn it into in place of an armor mod rather than being a weapon that you picked up?
Well, I've always hated it as a weapon, because once you have it as a weapon, your instinct is always going to be to melee and lunge and not use a grenade, not use your guns, and hold on to it at the expense of using those other gameplay mechanics. If you have it, you're not going to be having a secondary weapon. So you're basically, you're not going to have a secondary gun. The energy sword would be your secondary weapon.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you did it, because I always thought with the energy sword, as you said, it kind of takes away from the other mechanics of the game, so you can't switch to another weapon. I'm also very glad you got rid of the lunge as well, because I used to hate that in Halo 2 and 3.
I hate lunge as a concept. I will say that the energy sword, as it is in the 343 and Bungie games, is really good in like for stuff like Rift Ball and customs and stuff. Like it definitely brings a lot to the table in that regard. But I don't like it at all when it comes to competitive multiplayer or single player. Changes player behavior in a negative direction.
So if you could give the SPV3 treatment to any other Halo game, which one would you pick?
That's tough because I don't think you could actually do what we've done to any of the other games. Like, not just from a technical level. A lot of those games don't have the breadth to do lots of interesting things.
Sure.
Like, Halo 2 is always going to be handicapped by some of the stuff that goes on with the story and the elites. Halo 3 will always be sort of handicapped in that it basically meanders for most of the game with meaningless stuff until the end. Like, you can't throw anything else in there that would make the story more interesting, I don't think. I guess probably... Well, actually, you know what? I would probably say Halo 5 would be the one I would like to do the most.
Any particular reason
we're going to do it? I just think that there's a lot of interesting places in that game and interesting concepts. I've always liked the Prometheans as a concept of having another type of enemy, and I would definitely want to put my own spin on it. I just think there's a lot of freedom in Halo 5 to do new, interesting things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, even from Halo 4, I really enjoyed fighting the Prometheans and getting the Promethean weapons. Something I've always enjoyed about Halo is you always have the human side, the elite side, and then, yeah, adding the Prometheans in, I thought really made it more interesting as well.
Yeah, I like the Prometheans, and like in concept, there's obviously some problems with them. I don't think, it's controversial to say that. If anything, it's controversial to say that they're actually good.
Yeah.
But, I always thought the idea of another faction to replace the Flood as the third party would be really cool. And I don't think 5 executes on it as well as it could. I think 4, unfortunately, was going in the right direction, but it's clear they ran out of time with it. I would have liked to see some more stuff with them being the third party before they unified with the Covenant and stuff like that. And a little bit more time for you to interact with them on 3-way battles before the Infinity came in and stuff. I like them overall, especially in concept.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same here as well. I always liked the design of them as well. I always thought that was interesting. What was the most difficult part of making this mod?
Probably either making sure we had, I would say probably enough time, and also art-wise, art bogged us down, so much, because it's really tough getting artists to do content for a game that's so old.
Yeah.
No artist really wants to design for a 2001 era game. Why would they want to creatively stifle themselves?
Yeah, so they
or work on something and put all this detail in only to see it become, a smudgier mess than the stuff they made. Especially as years have gone on, recruiting art has been very difficult. But also, I would say just testing. Testing, it's been really difficult. I mean, it's so massive now. It's like 24 hours of gameplay to be, just the sheer amount of it makes it so difficult. Especially without a dedicated testing team, like in studio, like actual companies have. I make a change, I have to go in and spend like a good 30 minutes, 40 minutes to see if that change took in the right way. So, I mean, it's definitely a massive time drain and sink on us.
How many testers did you have in total for this version?
I mean, people who interacted every single day and were able to actually test. I mean, I don't say that as a way to put down people who couldn't, because people, testing and playing the same maps over and over and over again is not for everybody, and also not everybody has the time to be able to spend their free time testing the same maps over and over.
Yeah.
So I don't mean it as a way to knock people who may have not contributed as much as other people, because it's understandable. It was definitely a challenge and a hurdle to get everything tested. And I'm sure when this releases, we're going to find a dozen million bugs that we're going to have to adjust. But I mean, it's a 24-hour long Halo campaign. There's no way for a bunch of people like us. It's remarkable you're able to make it. It's even more remarkable to be able to fully test it. So it'll take time, but I think we got something that's pretty stable.
Yeah.
And also having it in more people's hands will give us a better idea of what things are going wrong and why. So.
Yeah, I suppose you're going to be expecting a lot within the first few weeks of release for sure.
Oh, I'm making sure all the testers are the ones that catalog it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be on a beach sipping Mai Tais or something.
I hope you look forward to it.